You are the royal guard. You guard the king. It sounds simple. It even sounds beautiful. The royal guard, the personal guard of the monarch, the shield and sword of the throne, shining armor, ceremonial formation, endless respect from all the other people who were not given such luck. In practice, you stand at the bedroom door at 3 o'clock at night and listen to your king shouting at the cook because the soup has gone cold. The soup was brought 20 minutes ago, and it was hot. In 20 minutes, the soup cooled down because the laws of physics make no exceptions for monarchs. The cook knows this. You know this. The king, apparently, has not heard. The cook will be taken away. Then it will turn out that he was taken away for nothing. Then a new cook will come, and the story will repeat with another dish. This is called serving an evil king. You learn gradually. Let's start with how you got here. The royal guard is not recruited by announcements in the market. People get into it in several ways, all equally random upon closer inspection. The first path is through military service. You fought well. Someone noticed it, someone passed it higher. Higher passed it even higher, and in the end, you were called to the capital. This is called a career by merit, and occurs less often than other options. The second path is family connections. Father served, grandfather served, great-grandfather served, and you will serve too, because that is how it is done, and because there is nowhere else. This is called hereditary service, and occurs more often. The third path, to be in the right place at the right time. You did something that someone important saw. Not necessarily great, just useful. You caught a horse that was running somewhere it should not. You helped a person whom you did not recognize. And then it turned out that it was the captain of the guard, just standing with the right face while people were being selected nearby. The third path is the most common of all. You got in through the third. You were standing at the city gates, carrying your duty in the city guard. And at that moment, a procession with a carriage passed by, and a child flew out of the carriage. A small one, clearly in royal clothes, clearly not supposed to fly out of the carriage. You caught him. Reflexively, without thinking, your hands worked before your head. The child turned out to be the younger nephew of the king. The younger nephew of the king turned out to be the favorite. You were taken into the guard the next week. You still have not understood whether it was the best or the worst day of your life. The opinion changes depending on what happens on a particular evening. Who is your king? An honest characteristic. His name does not matter. Let's call him His Majesty, because he allows his name to be pronounced only with the correct intonation. And the correct intonation is a separate skill that new guards master in about 2 weeks. His Majesty is evil. This is not a popular characteristic invented by peasants. This is an official style of rule. Evil in the sense of harsh, suspicious, inclined to punishments, seeing conspiracies where they are not, and not seeing them where they are, demanding about details that no one except him cares about, and indifferent to details that everyone cares about. His Majesty is not a villain in the full sense. A villain knows that he is a villain and somehow lives with it. His Majesty sincerely believes that he is a wise and just ruler who is simply constantly unlucky with his surroundings. The surroundings constantly fail him, constantly plot, constantly do everything wrong. His Majesty alone understands how it should be. This fact upsets him deeply and every day. He has no hobbies that are not connected with power. Hunting is power over animals. Feasts are demonstration of power over resources. Construction is power over space. Executions are obvious. The only exception is chess. His Majesty loves chess. He plays well and hates to lose. Courtiers know how to lose at the right moment with the expression of a person who honestly tried. You have seen this art. A courtier who a little too noticeably, accidentally makes a wrong move. The art is extremely subtle and requires real mastery in pretending. The loss must look genuine. Too obvious is insulting. Too random is suspicious. The perfect loss of a courtier is like a perfect pirouette of a dancer. No one should notice how much effort stands behind it. Your duties. The list is long, and part of it you did not expect. Officially to stand at the door at the right time, with the right weapon and the right facial expression. To accompany His Majesty in movements, to ensure safety, to respond to threats. Unofficially, it is longer. To listen silently. You hear everything. State councils, family quarrels, conversations that are held in your presence. Because a guard is not a person. A guard is part of the interior. This is a legally awkward position. You are present at state secrets. You know who hates whom, who owes whom, who sleeps with whom, and who reports on whom. You cannot do anything with this knowledge. You also cannot forget it. The head remembers on its own. You carry it like a silent archive, to be silent about the right things and to speak about the right things. This is a subtle boundary that is slightly different for all guards, and which is periodically tested for strength. Once His Majesty asked you directly whether the Lord Treasurer was at the council. You knew that he was. You knew that His Majesty knew that he was. You knew that the correct answer depends on why he asks. A pause of 2 seconds while your brain worked at a speed that you did not know it had. You answered that the treasurer was present. It was true. The treasurer remained in his position. You still have not understood whether the answer was correct or the question was correct. To stand motionless. This is a skill, a serious physical and psychological skill. To stand motionless for hours, in armor, in heat or in cold, without swaying, without yawning, without showing that your leg has gone numb. The leg always goes numb. This is a fact of anatomy that armor does not cancel. The first half year of service, your right leg went numb after about an hour, and you quietly redistributed your weight so that it was not noticeable. Then you learned to distribute the weight in advance. This is not in the regulations. This is passed from old guards to new ones orally, in whispers in the barracks, to pick up things. His Majesty drops things and does not bend down for them. This is not a physical problem, it is a principle. To bend down for your own things means that you bend down, which is visually unpleasant for a person convinced of his own greatness. Therefore, the guard closest to the fallen object picks it up. Is this in the regulations? No. It developed by itself, because the alternative is that His Majesty stands over the fallen object and waits until someone understands. The first time, you did not understand. You stood. His Majesty stood. The fallen glove lay between you. The pause lasted about 3 seconds, but subjectively, much longer. The captain of the guard later explained politely, quietly, with the expression of a person who had explained this many times and was ready to explain again, to accompany to the toilet, not inside, to the door, to stand at the door, to wait. This takes time that cannot be predicted. To stand silently at the door of the monarch's toilet room and keep a solemn expression on your face. This is either a meditative practice or a test of character. Probably both. Executions. This must be examined separately. Executions under an evil king are a part of the service that no one described honestly to you when you caught that child at the gate. Executions are different. By cause is when a person really did something serious enough that explaining why it is serious is not needed even for you. Treason, murder, something obvious. There are fewer of such executions than it seems. By suspicion is when His Majesty suspects. Suspicion in His Majesty works specifically. First suspicion, then evidence that will confirm the suspicion. Evidence, as a rule, is found when people try hard enough to find it, they find it. The result is predictable. By mood is when the morning started badly, or the council went unsuccessfully, or the soup cooled again, or the sky is too gray and someone must answer for it. This type is the most unpredictable for all participants, including the one who eventually answers. You stand at executions. This is part of the ceremonial order. The guard stands, the execution happens, the order is observed. The first few times it was hard, now it is hard differently, not as sharply. This is called adaptation and is a normal human reaction, which does not mean that it is right, just normal. The most difficult was not the first time. The most difficult was the time when a person you knew was executed. Not closely, you just saw him several times, spoke to him. Once he was one of those people who seemed normal. Whether his guilt was real or not, you still do not know. The investigation was short. You stood and looked straight ahead as required. This is also a skill. Conspiracies. There are more of them than you think. His Majesty sees conspiracies everywhere. Paradoxically, this is not always wrong. At the court of an evil king, conspiracies are a normal state of political life. Not because everyone is villains, simply because when the source of power is unpredictable and cruel, people look for ways to protect themselves or redistribute. A conspiracy is not always a palace coup. More often it is something small. Someone agreed with someone about something without sanction. Someone passes information to someone. Someone builds a coalition for the future. This is called politics in most kingdoms. Under His Majesty, this is called treason. And the difference between these two definitions is subjective. Your captain is a man named Orton, around 40. Scars in such quantity that they make up a separate biographical document. He knows more about conspiracies than His Majesty. He knows because guards hear everything. He knows what to do with this knowledge. The question is subtle. To reveal everything means executions throughout the court and chaos. To reveal nothing means sooner or later someone will succeed. To reveal what is needed at the right moment is the real work of the captain. Orton carries this knowledge with the same silent dignity with which you carry your numb leg. Experience and self-control. Once you yourself found yourself in an awkward place. You heard a conversation that you should not have heard. Two courtiers in a corner of the corridor. They did not see you behind the column. They were talking about something serious enough for you to understand that it was not a social conversation, not about a coup, but about something that His Majesty would want to know or would not want, depending on the mood. You stood behind the column and thought quickly as much as possible. To report to whom? To the captain. The captain already knows. He knows everything, directly to His Majesty. Bypassing the captain is a bad idea, for reasons understandable to anyone who understands how verticals of power work. Not to report. And if it turns out that you knew and kept silent, you stepped out from behind the column. The courtiers fell silent, looked. You passed by with such a look, as if you had just appeared from another place and heard nothing. They decided that it was so. You told the captain in the evening quietly, briefly. The captain listened, nodded, said nothing. What he did with this information is unknown. This is also part of the system. You pass it on. What happens next is not your responsibility and not your knowledge. This either saves from the burden of consequences or simply shifts it to another. probably both. Life in the barracks between duties. Guards live at the palace. This means that you are never completely off duty. You are on duty, you rest, but the palace is always around. You can go out into the city in your free time, but there is little free time, and it happens unpredictably. His Majesty changes the schedule for reasons that are not announced in advance. The barracks of the guards are a decent place by the standards of soldier housing. Separate from the rest of the army, closer to the palace, better supplied. They feed well. The safety of the monarch begins with the fact that his guards do not starve. The beds are normal. There is even something like a common room where you can sit, play dice, talk. Conversations in the barracks are specific. No one discusses His Majesty directly. This is understood without words. You can complain about abstract difficulties of the service. You can talk about past life, about family, about the cities you have seen. You cannot talk about what happens behind closed doors. The rule is not written anywhere. It is observed by everyone. Guards are divided into those who have served for a long time and those who recently. The boundary is about 3 years. Up to 3 years, you watch, learn, make mistakes that veterans forgive because they went through it themselves. After 3, you begin to understand the system from the inside. You know what is possible and what is not. You know people, you know how the court works. Your partner on duty is Gian. He is from the second group, already 8 years. Silent, economical in words, does everything correctly with such habitual ease that it seems as if doing things correctly is a natural state of a person and not the result of many years of practice. Jean taught you 3 things that are not in the regulations: how to correctly redistribute weight and armor during long standing, how to look through a person without insulting him with your gaze, and how to recognize the moment when His Majesty goes from simply dissatisfied to dangerously dissatisfied by the speed of hand movements. Hands. When the hands move quickly and without purpose, it is a bad sign. Orton knows this for a long time. Jean knows, now you know. There is also Dietrich, a guard recruited from the north, huge, taciturn, with an accent that makes his rare phrases even more weighty. Dietrich carries armor as if it were a linen shirt. No effort, no discomfort. At the same time, the only thing that makes him nervous is the approach of His Majesty in a narrow corridor. Not out of fear. Dietrich is not afraid of anything physically. It is just that Dietrich is very large, and His Majesty in such cases must pass by without touching him, which requires a maneuver that Dietrich in his size cannot provide without humiliating sideways pressing into the wall. Dietrich prefers to stand where there is space for maneuver. This is the only positional preference he has ever expressed. There's also young Pietro, half a year since he was taken, still in the period when he makes mistakes and receives explanations. Pietro tries, it is visible. Sometimes it interferes. Excessive effort creates tension, where relaxed habitual vigilance is needed. Jean explained. You explained. Pietro nodded and again slightly overdid it on the next shift. This is normal. It will pass. Foreign guests, a separate load. There are foreign guests at the court. Ambassadors, princes, trade delegations. Their visits require a special guard, ceremonial, solemn, representative. You are in the ceremonial formation. The armor is polished to a mirror shine, which takes an evening the day before. The expression on the face is solemn. Immobility is perfect. Foreign guests look at the guard. Foreign guests evaluate the country by what they see. A good guard is a good country, or at least a country that knows how to make an impression. This is important for diplomacy. Ambassadors are different. An Eastern ambassador once arrived with such a retinue that it took a whole day and part of the next to accommodate them. The retinue behaved as if they were also guarding their ambassador from your king, which was mutual and correct. They looked at each other with the professional gaze of people evaluating colleagues in the craft. A Western ambassador was a fragile man in expensive clothes. He looked like a person who came to negotiations and discovered that he came to the wrong place. His Majesty that day was in a difficult mood. The negotiations took place under tension that everyone felt, but no one named aloud. The ambassador left alive, which was a success. After the ambassador, His Majesty was in an especially gloomy mood. The cook received a reprimand for dinner, which was quite decent by any objective standards. You stood at the door and thought that it would be useful to have a wider vocabulary for internal states that cannot be shown outside. The story with the astrologer. It is still remembered in the barracks. His Majesty became interested in astrology. This, in itself, is not strange. Astrology is common at courts. Many monarchs consult the stars before important decisions. The strange thing was that His Majesty became interested very much to the degree when not a single reception, not a single meeting, not a single departure took place without consultation with the court astrologer Benedictus. Benedictus was a short man, fussy, with the smell of sulfur and resin from constant experiments, and with a gift of persuasive speech that allowed him in any situation to find in the stars confirmation of what His Majesty wanted to hear. This is a professional skill of the highest class. Benedictus was a virtuoso. The problem arose when the stars said that His Majesty should receive a foreign ambassador on Thursday, but not on Friday, because on Friday, Mars is in an unfavorable position relative to the moon. The ambassador arrived on Wednesday. His Majesty decided that Wednesday was also unfavorable. Benedictus confirmed. The ambassador waited until Thursday. On Thursday, His Majesty decided that the mood was not suitable. Benedictus found confirmation in the stars. The ambassador waited. The ambassador waited 5 days. The ambassador was a man with good diplomatic endurance, but a limited supply of patience. On the 6th day, he wrote a letter in which he politely informed that he was forced to return due to urgent matters. His Majesty took this as an insult. Benedictus found in the stars that the ambassador would return and relations would improve. The stars were optimistic. The ambassador did not return. Relations did not improve. Benedictus found in the stars an explanation for this as well. External hostile influences that prevented a favorable outcome. His Majesty nodded. Benedictus continued to work. You stood at all these audiences, all these waits, all this diplomatic theater of absurdity, with such a look as if everything that was happening was completely normal. Jean stood nearby. Both looked straight ahead. At some point, Jean quietly, almost without moving his lips, said Mars. Just this word. You just as quietly answered Moon, and again, silence and immobility. This is called guard humor. It is all like this. 1 or 2 words, understandable only to those who are nearby, without laughter and without visible reaction. People pass by and do not notice. You stand and understand. Benedictus, after half a year, fell out of favor for a reason not connected with the stars, a personal conflict with some courtier. He left. His Majesty was sad for a week, then found another astrologer. The other astrologer also found in the stars confirmation of what His Majesty wanted to hear. Continuity of the profession. What it does to you. Several years next to power that is unpredictable and cruel is not a neutral experience. You have become very good at reading people. Not because you wanted to, because in this service, incorrect reading of a person has consequences. Facial expression of His Majesty, tone of a courtier's voice, speed of someone's movements. All this is information that you collect automatically, process, store. This is useful. It is also a little frightening when you notice that you do this in free time with ordinary people in the market. You have become more careful in words. Words at court are tools with sharp edges. A wrong word at the wrong moment. You have learned to remain silent in cases when earlier you would speak. This saves time and sometimes something else. You have unlearned to be openly angry. Anger at a guard standing at the door of an evil king is a luxury that cannot be afforded. Anger exists, it is just stored in another place. Where this place is and what happens to it in the long run is a question to which you have no answer and which you try not to formulate. You evaluate people differently, not better or worse, differently. You have seen too much of how people behave when power is near. Someone straightens, someone hunches, someone becomes a completely different person. Power is like a lens. It shows what is inside. Sometimes it is beautiful, more often not. What did you understand? First, an evil king does not make service under him evil. It makes it complex. Your work is the same as under a good one. To stand, to guard, to perform. What you guard is your choice. Or not your choice is a separate question that you sometimes think about at night. You do not find an answer, you go to sleep. Second, the conspiracies that His Majesty sees everywhere are a way of managing fear. Not only others, his own as well. A person convinced that there are enemies around always knows against whom to stand. It is tiring but stable. It is unstable when the enemies end. Then new ones must be found. Third, the hardest thing in this service is not what you do. The hardest thing is what you see and do not do. You stand and watch. This is part of the work, and at the same time, a part that cannot be called work. Fourth, guards among themselves are more honest than anyone at court. Not because they are better, because they have nothing to divide. Conversations in the barracks are simple, without a second bottom. This is valuable where everything else has a second bottom. Fifth, you can get used to anything. This is not always good news. Results, numbers, years in the Royal Guard 6. The first 3 are training in field conditions. The next 3 are work. Duties at the main doors of the palace you lost count. Approximately more than 800, each for several hours. In total, you stand at doors longer than many people stand in lines in their whole life. Executions at which you stood 41. Of them by cause understandable to you less than half. The rest are soup, weather, politics, mood, conspiracies that you knew and kept silent about 3. Of them 2 were revealed by themselves, 1 not. What happened with the one that did not is unknown. Either it did not happen, or it happened quietly. The second option worries more. Once you saved the life of His Majesty himself. 1 real time. Not a conspiracy, just a person with a knife who somehow ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. You reacted before you thought. His Majesty said good. This is the maximum praise that you heard from him in 6 years. You remembered. The nephew of that very child whom you caught at the gate saw you once in the corridor. Recognized, nodded. You nodded. This also means something. Not sure what exactly. What is next? Orton is getting old. This is visible by how he moves in the morning the first few minutes. The place of the captain will be free someday. John is the first candidate. He has more experience. You are second if Jean refuses. Jean most likely will not refuse. His Majesty is not eternal. This is a thought that is not spoken aloud at court, but which is present in the head of everyone. What will happen to the guard when the next comes depends on what the next is. Guards are often changed with the change of monarch. Sometimes they are not changed. It cannot be predicted. Tonight you take your post at midnight, corridor of the Eastern Wing. 3 hours before the shift. Jean takes his post earlier, we'll pass it. The armor must be polished. Tomorrow, foreign guests again. From which country and why? The messenger was unclear. You did not utachinate. Not important. Stand straight, look forward. Do not yawn visibly. This is all that is required from you. The rest is not your work. Or it is, but in the sense that you do not yet know how to name. You polish the armor. Tomorrow will be what will be.